Today, we are diving into one of the oldest, weirdest, and maybe one of the most profound ideas in all of philosophy. It's a theory about the fundamental nature of reality, and believe it or not, it's getting a fresh look from modern scientists. So yeah, let's get right into it.
So let me start by asking you a question. When you think about the biggest mysteries out there, dark matter, what happened before the Big Bang, the sheer size of it all, what do you think is the absolute #1 hardest puzzle to solve?
Well, the answer might be a lot closer than you think. In fact, you're using it this very second. It's the simple, undeniable fact of your own conscious experience. And as we're about to see, it's a mystery that pushes science and philosophy to their absolute limits.
To really get why some thinkers are turning to this pretty radical idea, we first have to understand the problem they're trying to solve. And it's a big one.
You see, neuroscience is incredible. It can show us exactly which neurons are firing when you see the color red, or feel a pang of sadness, or taste your morning coffee. That's what we call the easy problem, just mapping all the brain's wiring. But the hard problem is, why does all that electrochemical buzzing feel like anything at all? Why isn't it all just dark, silent information processing happening inside our skulls?
So traditionally, people fall into one of two camps. Physicalism says your mind is just your brain. But that leaves this massive gap. How does plain old non-conscious matter suddenly create this inner world of feelings and experiences? It feels like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Then you've got dualism, which says the mind is something non-physical, separate from the brain. But then you have to wonder, how does some ghost in the machine actually pull the levers of the physical body? You see? Both views kind of run into a dead end.
So, if the two main roads are blocked, some philosophers are saying we need to look at a completely different path. It's a path that might seem really strange at first, but has a surprisingly deep logic to it.
And that brings us to panpsychism. The core idea is both simple and totally radical. Consciousness isn't some special thing that only happens in complicated brains like ours. Instead, it's a basic property of matter itself. It's woven into the very fabric of the universe, right alongside things like mass or electrical charge.
Now hold on, it is absolutely crucial to clear up the #1 misconception right away. Panpsychism is not the idea that your office chair is stressed out or that a rock is having deep thoughts. No, it's the idea that the fundamental particles making up the chair and the rock, the electrons, the quarks, possess an incredibly simple, bare-bones form of experience. Our consciousness is complex and rich. An electron's experience would be, well, unimaginably basic.
And listen, this isn't some new age idea someone just cooked up. This theory has a serious intellectual history. We're talking about the ancient Greeks, Enlightenment giants like Spinoza and Leibniz, all the way to pioneers of psychology like William James. It definitely fell out of fashion for a while, but now it is making a serious comeback.
So why on earth would modern thinkers take such a counterintuitive idea seriously? Well, it actually boils down to a couple of really powerful arguments. The first big argument is all about something called emergence. We see complex things emerge from simple parts all the time, like how wetness emerges from a bunch of H2O molecules, but consciousness, it just seems different.
I mean, think about it. If you start with a universe that's full of completely non-conscious, mindless bits of matter, and you just arrange them in a more and more complicated way, how do you suddenly get feelings? How do you get subjective experience? It's like arranging a bunch of black and white pixels on a screen and then, poof, suddenly getting the color red. It just doesn't follow. Panpsychism solves this by saying consciousness doesn't just pop into existence. It was always there. It just gets more organized.
Okay, the second argument. This one goes even deeper. It's about a fundamental limit to what physics itself can even tell us about the world.
And the physicist Arthur Addington put it perfectly. He pointed out that physics is incredible at describing the behavior of matter, its mathematical structure, its relationships, how it pushes and pulls on other things. Physics tells us what an electron does, but it is completely silent on what an electron is in and of itself. There's this giant hole in our description of reality.
So, this is where the panpsychist makes their big move. They look at that hole and say, I know it goes in there. What is the intrinsic nature of matter? What's the stuff the universe is really made of? It's experience. Consciousness is the secret fire driving the equations of physics, the inner reality that science can only ever describe from the outside.
But panpsychism is far from a slam dunk. In solving that big problem of emergence, it creates another one, and you could argue this new one is an even bigger hurdle.
And this brings us to the single biggest challenge for the whole theory. Okay, let's say we grant that an electron has some tiny speck of experience. How do trillions of these little, separate points of view somehow bundle together to create the single, rich, unified river of consciousness that you are having right now?
William James, even though he was sympathetic to the idea, really put his finger on the problem. He called it the mind dust theory. You can pile up all these little bits of mind dust, but do they automatically fuse together into one big mind? Or are they just a pile of little minds, each one, as he put it, shut in its own skin, totally unaware of the others?
This is what's known as the combination problem. And honestly, it's by far the hardest puzzle for panpsychists to solve. How do you get from many simple subjects to one single, complex subject? Right now, nobody has a clear, agreed-upon answer.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it seems like we're faced with a choice between different kinds of mystery.
Here's the trade-off. Standard physicalism asks us to accept what feels like a miracle, that consciousness just magically appears when you arrange dumb matter in the right way. Panpsychism avoids that miracle, but it asks us to accept a different mystery, the mystery of combination, that tiny minds can somehow join up to become a big mind. The real question is, which mystery are you more comfortable with?
And that's the wild, provocative idea at the heart of it all. It invites us to totally rethink our place in the universe. Not as some lonely, conscious accident in a dead, unfeeling cosmos, but as a complex ripple in a reality that has been awake in some very simple way from the very beginning. It's a question that challenges the very foundations of how we see the world, and it's one well worth thinking about.